we're really excited to have Pixar and Disney here as well. Here at the YouTube space, for those of you who haven't been here, our goal is that we like to bring together the most creative people in the world to learn, connect, and create. And I think when we think about the most creative people in the world, we obviously think about our YouTubers, but we also have a partner tonight with Pixar, and they come top of mind when we think about the most creative studios in the world. So we are so excited to have them here tonight. You're going to see some clips from the new film Inside Out. I actually feel really lucky. So I work with the creative team here at YouTube Space LA, but prior to this, I worked at Disney. So I'm one of the few people who maybe worked at Disney and Google here. And so I got to see a very, very early cut of Inside Out when it was just dialogue and basically animatics. And we were laughing, we were crying. It's a fantastic film. So you're going to see some clips of it tonight. One thing we do have to say is that the clips tonight haven't been released to the public worldwide. So one thing we ask is that you not record them and release them to the public worldwide before Disney and Pixar get the chance to do so. So tonight, no recording of the clips that you'll see. Just enjoy and experience Inside Out. So without further ado, I want to introduce the filmmaker and the producer for the film. These guys have worked together before on a film called Up. Please welcome Pete, Docter, and Jonas Rivera.
Hey everybody, how's it going? I'm Pete, that's Jonas.
Hi.
We're going to attempt to kind of talk a little bit about how we made this film and kind of a little about ourselves too.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, thank you for having us. We've worked on this film for a long time. There was talk about it a little over 5 years, and so we just finished it and had our wrap party at Pixar a couple weekends ago, and so we feel really good. We're really proud of it. We're so proud to be able to come and talk about it and talk to you guys about it because you guys make stuff and like to make stuff. We like to make stuff. It just takes us maybe a little longer than we like to admit, but we'll walk through that process. And it's a little bit like a family slideshow. So interrupt, call out, ask Pete to back up off the slide you want to see, or go faster or whatever. Right, Pete?
That's correct. There we go. Good. So, I guess I'll start with just a little bit about myself, and then Jonas can talk. I grew up here in the Midwest, in this house in Bloomington, Minnesota. This photo was taken in May, by the way. And I was a pretty happy kid, I had a good fashion sense,
Radio Shack.
Until junior high, and then things got kind of confusing to me because there was this whole idea of having to be cool and dress right, and that was not, I didn't know what was going on. So I was most happy alone fiddling with electronics in my room or drawing cartoons. So animation absolutely amazed me. I love drawing, and what really hooked me was when I figured out I could make things move. So drawing was one thing, but then when I made flip books in the corners of my math book, which I still do now. Here's one that I did for a Christmas card a couple years ago for my kids. So the punchline at the end you can see is the joyous sounds of Christmas.
Because every year, and my kids, we have every year from like 1996 lined up, and that's like a big Christmas tradition to play with each flip books.
And that's really what we do at Pixar, only we use billions of dollars worth of computers to do it instead of 59 cents worth of paper. And this is me at Pixar in 1990, where I started. And looking back at that time, Pixar, nobody knew Pixar. There was no such kind of real place. They'd done a couple shorts. But really, if you knew about Pixar, it was because of the Pixar image computer, which was their kind of primary business. This is now in a museum, of course. And within a few weeks of me starting, Steve Jobs showed up, and I got to meet him, and then he fired half the company. And then they stopped making these. So I thought, is this really... Did I choose the right place to go? But within a couple of years, we got started on a feature. So there's Joe Ranft on the far left, and me, and John Lasseter, and Andrew Stanton, and we're working on Toy Story. which was the first computer-generated feature film. And believe it or not, when we started on Toy Story, we were sort of pissed off because animation in the early 90s, those of you who were around at that time, you remember animation was sort of in this box, right? If there was an unwritten rule. If it was animated, it was a musical. Now, there's nothing wrong with musicals. I love musicals, but animation can do anything, right? And so we swore to each other, man, if we get a chance to do this, we're going to really try to push things and do something new. So we tried to push things, no music, buddy film structure that had not really been done, no cute animals, and we tried to really push things on every film we've done ever since. But it really all kind of started with my love of Disneyland, as a kid. So, weirdly, at the same time, there's Jonas.
We think maybe the same day. We don't know. What? Yeah. That Mickey might be the same. Yeah, it literally is like a family slideshow. But this is,
that's more big.
I don't know, marginally worth talking about because we grew up. This is literally where my career started because my parents took me to Disneyland. I was like 3 or 4 years old, and it part of this sort of echoes in the film. Like this was like the core memory of my life. Like walking through the gates of Disneyland was what. I just fell so deeply in love with it that even at that age, like I wanted to work there or be part of it and work at Disney and growing up. And unlike Pete, I wasn't because he could draw and was a great artist. I was not. Even shortly after this, I realized I'm not ever going to be an artist. But I loved animation. This is just kind of where it cemented. And we've sort of grown up at the studio sharing this passion of that feeling of being a kid. In the 70s, going into Disneyland, and in a weird way, that's our business of trying to bottle that feeling, right? And somehow present a shirt there, a dragster.
All right.
I had a belt that day. I remember it. It said Lake Tahoe. I remember it.
Yeah. This next picture was taken a little while later. There's Jonas at Pixar.
Don't be jealous of my Mac. But this is only there because there's very few pictures of us back in the day. I came into Pixar. Pete was there. You started what year?
90.
And I came in 1994. I was a student at San Francisco State. And I just dreamed of working in animation. I wanted to work for Disney. I wanted to work at Imagineering or at Disney. And I actually kind of hated computer animation. I thought it looked cold and stiff and lame. But then I saw at San Francisco State, I saw Luxo Jr., the film that John had done, which was the first computer animated film to be nominated for Academy Award in 1986. And I fell in love with it, and I cold called Pixar and said, I'm a film student at San Francisco State. Do you guys have an internship program? And they said, no. But we need help. Can you come down tomorrow? We're busy. And I didn't even know about Toy Story, so I came down and kind of looked. Well, this is a little later, but it was in the era where I jumped into this mom and pop kind of grocery store of an animation studio. And Steve Jobs was rolling in the hall, and I met these guys, and that's the whole company.
Yeah, right there.
Where are you, Pete?
I think I'm in the back.
Yeah.
Sales make the talk.
You got the hat and feathers.
Yeah.
Anyway, there's something too. But it was like the most amazing group of strange people that were all, I don't know, bonded by passion and loving animation. Just wanting to make things one frame at a time and make it as good as we could get. It was a really fun time.
People were allowed to bring their dogs. So there's 4 dogs.
There's John in the middle.
Once in a while the dogs would get in fights. You'd hear it in the hallway.
There I am.
Or leave little presents.
Yeah, anyway.
Where are you?
I'm on the ride with those cool shades. It's good times.
It was. It was fun.
We can talk about old Pixar all day. It's like nothing to do with Inside Out.
That's right. When Toy Story came out, it was a big success, which surprised the hell out of me, I can tell you that. But it was great. Just because it only felt like a bunch of guys doing this for fun in our garage, and one of the greatest things that happened for us was getting to meet some of our old heroes, like Chuck Jones in the middle there, or Frank Thomas and Ollie Johnson, or Joe Grant. I get to hang out with Joe Grant and talk about his, time working on Dumbo and Fantasia and stuff. That was awesome.
And the coolest thing to me was you have to understand, like Tom Hanks would be coming through, and like nobody cared, but like a 90-year-old guy that worked on Dumbo, and everyone would freak out. Joe. Talk about Joe though. Joe was cool. Joe was cool. The Up is dedicated to Joe.
Yeah. Somehow after Toy Story, John let me develop a movie which became Monsters, Inc., which actually Joe Grant came with the title for that. And I don't really remember asking to, but somehow I ended up directing that. So that was my first gig as a director. And Jonas worked in the art department on that show. And so then after that, he and I worked on Up, which came out in 2009, which brings us... So that basically brings us to 2009, which they were nice enough to say, hey, can you guys do another one?
Yeah.
And the thought was, man, if we could, you always want to do something new, right? You always want to bring people somewhere that they haven't been before, do something they haven't seen. And yet, I also knew, having done the more extreme version of that if you go too far, if you pitch something that has no bearing on reality and nothing for people to grab onto, then they don't engage, right? So my thought was I wanted to bring the audience something that they could relate to, yet no one had ever seen before. And that seemed kind of impossible. But then I had sort of this idea, it really started with my daughter. So that's Ellie. And she was about 9 when she did the voice of young Ellie in Up. And she was really kind of a lot like that character. She was really full of a lot of energy, running around, talking to people, like this. But then she turned 11, and suddenly we saw a lot more moments like this, with moping and quiet. And it made me wonder, what happened to that childhood joy? What was going on inside her head? And that's really what led us on this 5-year journey full of impossible questions, like, why do we remember? How do songs get stuck in your head? Where did that weird dream come from last night? And we're calling it Inside Out. And I think Jonas and I would both agree it's the most difficult thing that we've ever done, for many reasons. But I'm excited about the film first because it's based on a strong, real emotional experience that I had dealing with growing up. And second, because we got to work with some really amazing people, which we're going to talk about.
Yeah, and I just want to echo what Pete said, because as producer of the film, when he came and pitched it that way, based on and I know Ellie, I've seen her grow up, but just based on this very complex idea, but based on a very simple observation. I thought, this is really cool and inspiring. I have 3 young kids, and just that question seemed worthy of a movie to me. And so it was that we rallied the crew around, and we'll talk about that.
Yeah.
It was a really nice moment.
But first, let's just talk a little bit about the way we make films at Pixar. I've been a huge fan of animated films ever since I was a kid, and the way I sort of pictured it working was that, Walt would be sitting in bed, and you just go, Dumbo, and they'd make it, just like, here to him. That's not really how it works. So here's, for us anyway, at Pixar, it starts with a concept, right? And then after a couple of whiteboards and think sessions and cards and things, we produce a treatment. And we usually produce a couple treatments before we get that approved, and then we do a script and a couple versions of the script, and then when that kind of gets approved, we bring in storyboard artists who start to draw literally thousands of drawings to visualize this, and we bring in dialogue and music and sound effects, and we cut it all together. And once we have the whole film cut, we stand up in front of the company and we show the movie. And then we do that all again, and we screen it again, and we rewrite and reboard and everything, we screen it again, and again, and again, and hopefully somewhere along the line, we hope that we get the first sequence or so approved to actually make it, and then hoping to get the whole thing locked so that we can actually produce the film and finish it. You'll notice, by the way, these are years. And that every one of these tick marks is basically a time for us to show it to other people. Because I think for us, that's kind of part of it. It's a key ingredient, right? It's having a new audience come in and look at it.
Yeah, I think when you're working on one of these movies, you have an idea, we love the idea, but it's a motion picture that you're trying to make. And so you're trying to simulate a motion picture in every chance you can, so that you judge it appropriately. And and it just takes a lot of time. I mean, these tick marks are every time we kind of present it, either in a pitch or a screening. And to be honest with you, they're all really pretty bad. I mean, Ed Catmull, who's the president of the studio, his kind of quote is, "Our job is to be wrong as fast as we can." And something you say, to pin it to you, is, which I've always been inspired by as your producer, is let's not make the movie as much as let's find it. So you kind of give yourself this runway with your team to really find it. So this is more for us, just because we went through it. We're just trying to feel better about all the but that's how it looks like on the calendar.
So in this case, I started with this basic idea that I had about an 11-year-old kid, but the kid's not our protagonist. She's actually the setting, because inside her head are her emotions that are our main characters. And so, without really a lot more than that, I took the basic pitch and we went to John Lasseter to tell him about it. So this is actually John's office. So we went in, he's quite a toy fan. So we went to tell him about the idea, but it was too distracting in there, so we went to this boring white room, and we pitched the idea to John, and he agreed that it sounded interesting. Jonas, you said you sort of saw him moving forward.
I think I took this, and what was cool is Pete, and we had some videos of things and movies that have been, and as you just said that, like, what if we could tell a movie about a little girl, but it's not about her, it's through the point of view of her emotions, we personify. I saw John sit forward, and I was like, oh, that's exactly what we want the audience to do, and John kind of hit the audience. So it was a really nice moment.
So the first thing that Jonas did was to book us an offsite to have some time to think about it. And this is at the Disney Family Museum, which is up in San Francisco, right across the bay from where we are. You can see the Golden Gate Bridge back there.
But you see the movie, too. Keep this in mind. So when you see the movie, we have a setting in San Francisco that we kind of use this location for hockey rink that doesn't really exist in the world, but we put it on the side of the Walt Disney Museum.
Yeah. So there's Jonas, that's Ronnie Del Carmen, who's the co-director, Michael Arndt on the left there, and we had already named our main character Riley, and we were walking around and we saw this sign, and we're like, okay, that's a sign. We got one thing right.
We have one thing. Check. Can we agree?
Yeah. So we worked out story beats, we have our portable post-it notes here, working that out, and a bunch of scrawlings on whiteboards, including some basic drawings like
that's
this.
The first time, back up though, that's sort of the first time you drew like a console and the characters.
Yeah.
This is the very first fragment of what would become Inside Out.
Yeah. This blob, that was anger.
Anger's
first. He showed up pretty early. And this was a version of sadness that Ronnie did. But it was about this time we started realizing how little we knew about the subject. I didn't even know what emotions actually existed. And though I'm showing you a picture of the brain here, we decided that the film will be set in the mind. So no blood vessels and dendrites and things. We're going to do like more abstract stuff. Consciousness or memories, personality attributes, things like this. And to find out more about this, we talked to a ton of psychologists and psychiatrists and neurologists. And the weird thing was, depending on who you talk to, you get really different answers about even basic questions like, how many are there? How many emotions? One guy said 3. Another guy said 27. Another guy said none. So,
measurable emotion.
Yeah. So we ended up hooking up with this guy, Dr. Paul Ekman. That's him on the top row, by the way. He lives in San Francisco, which was part of the reason why we were excited about talking to him, because we could bug him really easy, but also because he had a basic theory that there were 6 basic emotions. And so happiness, surprise, fear, sadness, anger, and disgust. As we worked through it, as thinking like an animator, I was like, well, I think surprise and fear would probably be fairly similar. So that's how we ended up with the 5 that we have in the movies, thanks to research. However, along the way, Ekman came back and said, well, he has a new theory that there are 16 emotions. He said it was too
animated movie, too bad.
Yeah.
But I thought that was, it was really interesting to us because just even the fact that, like we thought about love, right? And like, is love emotion? No, according to Dr. Ekman, it's not a measurable emotion. It's a state of mind, a state of being. So we learned a lot about the clinical definition of emotions, and the fact I think that was most interesting to us was that they have a job, that there's a reason. And it's kind of weird to say that I never had really thought about that. But as we started thinking about these guys as characters and thinking about like fear, it was, well, what would their job be, right? Some of them were obviously fear, who's Bill Hader, who's so great, and we always love Bill, but his job is to prevent you from taking unnecessary risk. His job is to keep you safe. So if there's something, it's a dog that bites you when you're a kid, you're going to remember you're going to be afraid of dogs. That's sort of self-preservation. And that idea really, I think, kind of unleashed the writing. They all have anger.
Yeah, anger you think of as, I always thought anger is kind of a negative thing that gets you into fights or road rage or stuff, but it turns out that anger really keeps things fair. That's what triggers anger is fairness. And as Ekman is fond of pointing out, anger is a big motivator in social justice. So a lot of times people will be motivated to go help people really thanks to anger. So that makes sense because Louis Black uses a lot of that in his work, in his comedy.
Yeah. So Louis Black, when we called him and pitched him to do Louis Anger, he said something like, yeah, real great, stretch casting guy. Real creative.
Disgust is basically a response that keeps you from getting poisoned. In fact, the classic disgust face that we make is probably, according to Darwin, who did some work on emotions, in the late 1800s, he thinks that it came from the basic idea of spitting food out. So if you feed something bitter to a baby, they make this kind of face. And that sort of simple, primitive form of disgust, like this food is gross, probably evolved into social disgust, like, ew, that's a gross outfit, or whatever.
Right. We think Darwin would be pretty happy that we use Britney Spears to illustrate this.
Anyway, disgust is not voiced by Britney Spears. She's voiced by Mindy Kaling, who's really great and funny and appealing. And
she was, there's always this to her. I just thought it was funny. She's like, really want me to play disgust?
Yeah.
And we're like, well, no. The character is disgusted. She's beautiful. She's not disgusted. Oh, okay.
Sadness is kind of less obvious. We don't really want to feel sad. It feels negative to us. We sort of try to avoid it or even self-medicate. So we kind of use that to our advantage in the story, that none of the characters understand the point of sadness through quite a bit of the movie. And she's voiced by Phyllis Smith, who you might recognize from the U.S. version of The Office. But of course, there's a reason that Riley is mostly happy, and that's because her lead emotion is joy. And joy is voiced by Amy Poehler, who's fantastic. And this was really a reason I was so excited about this idea from the get-go, is that these characters are all really strong, opinionated, caricatured kind of personalities, which is exactly what animation does really well. I remember I was pitching it to Jonas, and he's like, yeah, if we do this right, this could be our version of Disney's Seven Dwarfs. We have that same chance to kind of grab onto really iconic, strong personalities. So, Joy herself is, of course, expresses more than just joy. So this is an early animation test we did. And we also wanted these characters to look the way our emotions feel. So instead of flesh and skin or whatever, they're made out of energy. You can kind of see these little particles that move and roil. So those are...
I love that used to say that if you look at some of the artwork in the gallery that they put up here, Pete would say to the art department is tasked to feel what these characters look like, and you would say, like, I want them to look how your emotions feel, which is really cool, but what is that? And so there were all these different elemental things that they were after, but we love that idea of energy, some sort of compressed energy, that maybe she leaves particles behind her, she moves quickly, and even her hair is sort of pixelated by design and so forth. And she's illuminated, right? She's actually a light, so she doesn't cast shadows. She's beautiful and illuminated.
Spills light onto
the
stuff. But before we go any further, maybe we can show you a clip from the film. So we'll show you a couple of clips in a second, but first let's go back in time, before all this existed. About 4 years ago, we had our index cards, our whiteboards, and this is where we really start writing. And most people think of writing like this with scripts, and that's true, but for us it's also drawing, right? And whiteboarding and carding. And the reworking of the story takes many forms, and it goes on for years and years. In fact, This picture was taken 2.5 years into the process. So 2.5 years of working, we finally worked everything out. This picture was taken 3 years into the process. We finally worked everything out. Actually, the story is something you never finish. And as a writer, it's actually always on your mind. In fact, as an example of how long it takes, this is Jonas's assistant, Alyssa.
This is Alyssa. This is Alyssa with Pete, and this is our production calendar, and we've worked it out. Alyssa, as you can see, is pregnant here, and she's also the voice. She did the tent voice for Joy for us. She was always in the booth recording for us. And
here she is about a year ago.
She's a year ago with that daughter that's not grown up, and still recording Joy. So it's literally that. Luella is her daughter's whole life.
Yeah. It's making this movie.
I like this one. This we were having lunch one day, and Pete rewrote the whole outline of the movie on the napkin. So I took a picture of it. It's in the archive now.
Yeah. So as soon as we feel like we're starting to work things out and get script pages specifically that we feel confident in, we pass them along to the story team. That's them. Besides eating at Denny's, their job is to translate the script into visuals. And so this is Josh Cooley, who is our head of story on this show. This is footage from him working on Up. This is the end battle scene with the dogs fighting flying planes. What kind of movie is this? Anyway, you can not only draw single images, as you can see, but you can flip through and see them kind of in succession, which is really important because then when I approve this, it goes to editorial, and that's Kevin Nolting sitting there, and he's the guy who puts it all together with music, sound effects, and dialogue, which we record ourselves at first, as Jonas was talking about. And I usually sit over there on the very left, next to Ronnie, and this is my view from the couch. That's Kevin on the right, and on the left is our story artist, and this is her view of us. There's another view from behind. Anyway, Kevin cuts all this on a nonlinear Avid, the Avid. You guys, I would assume some of you guys use Avid. And Kevin loves the Avid; it's his favorite tool to use. But when everything is cut together with the music and sound effects, it kind of looks like this.
Pretend to be Joy.
Whatever. Won't it be great to be back out on the ice? Oh, yeah. Sounds fantastic.
What the heck was that? They said do it like Joy.
So anyway, you can see, the reason we do this is to give ourselves an approximation of what the film is going to be. And usually our first attempt, our reaction is something like this. Didn't really work. So we start thinking and talking and drawing and rewriting at the same time, and Kevin's recutting his dialogue and reworking it. And after about 3 or 4 rounds of that on every sequence in the film, in this film there are 27 sequences, so there's several months spent in editorial recutting stuff. We drag people out of their offices into the theater and play the movie after a couple opening disclaimers. And who, besides the kitchen staff and whoever else we can get to go to the movie, we also have John Lasseter and Andrew Stanton.
We got a brain trust. Yeah. John and Andrew Stanton and Brad Bird and the writers and heads of story of the studio, and we'll come in and we'll sit in this room afterwards, and everyone will give notes. And boy, will they give notes.
Yeah, and this is really where we get feedback from them. And, we sort of somewhat pompously, somebody named us the Brain Trust, which you get the same quotes, Brain Trust. But because some of these ideas are great, and other ones really stink. And some offer the right solution, but the wrong problem, or vice versa. And so it's really up to us after this meeting to go away and kind of cull through all the notes. There's, you can see Brad in the middle there, and John over there. So we take all these notes and we go back and we rewrite the whole thing, and we reword it and cut it, and we do that again and again and again. So each one of these cycles takes about 3 to 4 months, and we usually do that 7 to 8 times on every film.
Yeah.
So meanwhile,
when this is all happening in story and narrative, this sort of structure to come together, the art department is taking the script and the story reels, and they're trying to figure out what does this world and these characters going to look like. This is Ralph Eggleston, our production designer, and starting to fill the room with the designs. Some of it, again, what you see here, but this movie, as tricky as it was narratively, I'd say it was equally tricky visually, because you have a world that has no I don't know, there's no point of reference. It's not like on Cars or on Finding Nemo where we could, you could look at certain things and go diving and so forth. What do your emotions look like? What does the mind look like? We knew we didn't want to make inner space. We knew it was this metaphoric thing, but it was a long road of trying to find these. I love this next picture, which is Albert Lozano. This is kind of not a character lineup, literally, but it sort of is. This is sort of this idea that the characters all came from these, as people say, feelings, but they all came from these, I don't know, elemental shapes. Like Joy is a star. She's glowing and she's always out and she's beautiful. It's almost like an explosion. Sadness is like a teardrop, literally. She's the shape and color of a teardrop. Anger is a brick. It's this little like briquette. Disgust, not really illustrated here, but she's sort of based off of stock of broccoli, right? Even her shape and color. And fear, we thought was funny. He's just a raw nerve. It's literally a squiggly line. So that was like the point of origin, right, on the designs. And then, of course, there's millions of iterations. I think Disgust had a fair share of what in the world was she going to look like. There she is. We liked them all at one point.
Yeah.
I remember thinking for sure it was going to be that one. I don't know. It wasn't even close.
But once we find something that we like, we move to sculpt. And we have a great sculptor, Jerome Rand, that's in the middle.
He did. I probably said, when's Joy done, Jerome? We need her done.
Yeah.
That's what I got.
Yeah. So we work out the sculpt and we show it to John. Sometimes he likes it, sometimes he doesn't. But anyway, this is how the cast sort of rounded out. We always get great notes from John. He really pushes us and pushes us in ways that we never really, hadn't thought of before.
But you can see even in what we call our final characters, I mean, Sadness doesn't look anything like that, and Disgust looks different. So even from our final sculpt into the computer, they change.
And you'll notice at this point we haven't really talked about voices, because at this point we're just doing design, we're working on story. And it's only about now, as things start to crystallize, we start to think about casting. We mentioned Bill Hader was one of the first guys that we get to work with. We cast him as Peter. And he was great because not only did he lend his voice to the film, but just his brain as well. He did a lot of writing with us. This is actually Jonas's living room, our kitchen rather.
Yeah.
So we're sitting around.
He just came for a week and we sat and he'd write. He's so funny and he's such a great character actor. He just really helps us with the voices of everybody.
He always blows away when we record with him. In fact, here we got a little clip to show you Bill standing in the mic. Let's see. Oh, I guess it's not a clip, is it? It's just a still.
Imagine Bill saying hilarious things.
I apologize. Most of the recording is done at Disney, Stage B. And let's go inside.
Stage B is important to us because it's sort of Disney animation historians. I mean, this is where they recorded Jungle Book and did the ADR for Mary Poppins, and we just feel honored every time we get to go in there and stand there. It's a hallowed ground to us.
There's Don Kane, our recording engineer, and traditionally, I guess you'd sit back behind the glass, but we sort of found that the actors feel lonely out there, so we sit with them, and that way I can hop up and talk to Amy or whatever. And Amy was great. She was another one that we recorded. I look like I'm half asleep there. Anyway, what was that picture? Do we have a better picture than that?
No.
Okay. We worked with Amy for a full. Before we recorded, we sat and worked with her writing-wise and rewrote her part. And she was a great collaborator. A lot of suggestions for things that Joy, how she might approach them.
I mean, Joy, just talk about that for a second. I think Joy is the main character in the movie, and without giving too much away, I think what was cool and what was great about Amy is you saw Joy at the beginning. She's an optimist, right? Did you talk about this at all? Just like how that's a very fragile thing to do.
It was. I mean, most people, they're just happy all the time. You kind of want to punch them in the face, because they don't seem genuine. They don't seem real. And when we talked to Amy about that, she's like, I think I can help you. She was really self-aware about
smart. So she came in and wrote with us, and we pulled apart the script, and here we are.
Yeah, we're together. And then the next day we went and recorded with her, and she's just fantastic. At the same time, we're thinking of our background characters and this is some of the Mind World stuff. This is headquarters where they work. That's more or less how it ended up. And Joy looks at the back. We see the Mind World. A lot of places we get to go in the place like Imagination Land, which is like a giant amusement park where all of Riley's daydreams and flights of fancy are brought to vivid life.
This is a really fun part because you got to think about, okay, the mind, what's the geography of it, right? Like, how big is it, and what are the things that we would all have? And I love that idea that it was the scale of it was so immense. I mean, we did the ocean for Finding Nemo and outer space for Wall-E, but we were kind of friendly, like, but the biggest set we were ever going to do was the inside the mind of an 11-year-old girl. It's like what you said, you kind of wanted the audience to come away feeling like they only saw, like a quarter of it or something.
Yeah.
So you get to imply the scale, and it was a lot of fun to do that and think about what would those places be and what would they look like.
This is leading down to the subconscious, where all bad stuff is kept. We get to go down there.
Locked in.
Yep. And then, we also go to dream production, where all of your dreams are produced every night under the strain of limited time and budgets, of course.
That was a fun idea, though. So that you get to go and they would take the memories of the day and, quickly with no time.
Writers have to work really fast. But
that's why your dreams are weird.
Yeah. And then this is an early version of long-term memory, which is where your billions of memories are stored. So it was a really fun process to play with all these concepts, things that we've all kind of thought about, we've never seen before until we got to build it here in the mind. Of course, all of this was only half of the design challenge because we also have the real world. As I mentioned, I'm from Minnesota, and so we just picked out as a place that Riley would be from. And Christian Norelius, who's the artist here, really captured the feel of the Midwest. For the other half, when they moved to San Francisco, the art department took a field trip all the way across the Bay Bridge to San Francisco and scouted for real locations. Once it's all built in the computer, we have, this is Patrick Lynn, he's our DP, and really the way to think about it is like a doll set. You have this camera, you can move anywhere in three-dimensional space. So the layout department is really our equivalent of the camera department.
Our cinematographers.
Yeah.
So they compose every single shot using the space of the model and the characters, and based sort of on the storyboards, and sometimes you deviate from that. But this is where the sort of the cinema of the movie is.
Yeah,
really
a couple of us were talking outside. It's really the same as live action. We're thinking wide shots and overs and crane shots, and we had in this film we wanted to differentiate between the inside world and the outside. So we created a whole separate camera language, different lens choices, all of that stuff. Animation is another thing I want to talk about, and here's a little clip of Joy.
Did you have to play that?
Well, I have to practice, and I don't think of it as playing so much as hugging. Okay.
So for a lot of us,
we grew up watching classic cartoons from the 40s and 50s, like Chuck Jones, Tex Avery, and the classic Disney shorts like Goofy and stuff. And this film really allowed us to push things. So look at the same thing in oops, it's not working now. That was supposed to be in slow motion. If you when the film comes out and you can step through it and look at it, you'll see there's all sorts of shape distortion and stretching and all sorts of stuff that we were able to finally do, basically learning off of these great old cartoons, these grandmasters.
This is really important to us because in our medium replicates reality really well. So you guys know this, but like Buzz Lightyear, who's a model, as far as the computer's concerned, he's a physical model taken from space, made of plastic, and he moves like a puppet. And what Pete was really interested in is how can we break those shapes and really get beautiful S-curves out of things and do things that are kind of geometrically expensive in the computer to do, but we really pushed on the tools to have and we even had a guy, I don't know if you're going to show that, but we had someone sitting in Bagels drawing over frames so that we could try to get that hand-drawn feel that we loved somehow shot into our medium.
Yeah.
And so Joy, we're just really proud of her because she's got that way to move that's so weightless.
And not only is Joy a character, she's also a light source, as Jonas mentioned. She doesn't cast shadows, she casts light onto other characters and objects. This normally you'd have a shadow but she just has light under there. So
Now,
that was really hard too, because like, how do you light a light bulb? You know, if you just take a picture of a light bulb, it's like a flat white surface. So we had to do a lot of cheating to get sculpting and shaping.
And it's sort of footnote at Pixar, you know, we have this great tools department and the computer scientists that rebuild and develop the tools as we go. And on Monsters University, they were very excited because they came with this tool called Global Illumination. Global Illumination allowed our lighters to set the key lights and the fill lights and the sun and any practical light, and we kind of compute in real time. And you can finally get like realistic lighting and deep shadows. Oh, everyone's excited. And then the very next movie, people are like, yep, I don't want any of that. I want crazy, fake, glowing characters that have nothing to do with physical reality. It's almost like, thanks.
Well, it's all inspired by the story.
It's all inspired by the story.
Speaking of that, we're going to show you a couple more clips here. This one is we call Forgetters. So Joy has been. What happens is Joy and Sadness get thrown out of headquarters. Long story, you'll see it. Hopefully you'll see the movie. This sequence, she's been wandering through long-term memory for a long time, and finally she hears somebody and she runs towards them.
We don't know these. They're in her phone.
Give me the pie.
I think we have one more clip. Yeah. Some of you may have seen this was we used this as basis for a trailer, a teaser trailer. But Joy and Sadness are lost down in memory, in long-term memory, which leaves anger, fear, and disgust in charge up in headquarters. So that makes everything kind of different. Even something like family dinner is quite different than it used to be. So we'll take a look. Explaining the fun of why, you know, like deja vu, why songs get stuck in your head, deja vu, how dreams are made, deja vu. So we've had a blast. We've really poured ourselves. We have honestly really poured all of what we have into this movie, and we hope that you guys like it when it comes out. Are we going to do any questions or anything?
Yes, we have some time.
Questions.
First, I have to take a selfie, I guess. Go ahead. There we go.
Photo bottle.
All right, thank you.
What was the budget for Inside Out?
What was the budget for Inside Out? The budget for Inside Out. No, we never talk about dollars because they're sort of the policies. But I'll tell you this: these movies take the way I look at them as producer. They sort of allot us a certain amount of people. It takes about 20,000 labor weeks to make one of these movies, and this one came in just about that. It's about almost exact is what Up was. So that's the budget we work for. That's sort of how we count. That's our metric, and so that's what it took. 5 years and a whole bunch of people.
Really talented people.
Yeah.
Right here.
How hard was it picking the people that did the voices?
How hard was it to pick the cast?
Well, some of them came easy and others were a little more difficult, mainly based on the character writing. Anger was one. I would use Lewis Black as an example from the beginning, you know, as I was pitching. But Amy, as Joy, was really difficult. Not so much to cast her, but just to find the character. Once we found her, the whole character kind of came to life. So.
We also have Diane Lane who plays mom, and Kyle MacLachlan plays dad. We have a lot of great cameo, characters in there too. So it's one of the funnest parts is the casting.
What always happens is once you cast it, you record with the actors, and they end up changing the part. I go, this character wouldn't say that, and they would talk like this, and so when it really is working, it's fun because then the characters almost talk to you as a writer. You're sitting there going, yeah. And they sometimes they say dumb things, but sometimes they say funny things, and you try to put that down.
And that with Phyllis Smith, the stand-up, is such a great actress. She's so funny and she's hesitant with things, and that seems to really lead to her. Is that okay, Joy? That's always a question mark. You didn't write that as much as that would be discovered, right?
Yeah, who gets to decide?
Who gets to decide? You can decide.
Microphone.
Okay. Where's the microphone?
Over here.
Okay, hi.
Hi, I wanted to ask, I've noticed a trend in a lot of animated movies that it seems to be about bringing families together in a way of really understanding each other in a more complex way, with a less stereotypical than other movies. Was that one of your goals, or was that one of the original goals, or did that just sort of come up through your original inspiration of your daughter suddenly turning into a movie teenager?
Yeah, it was really a kind of a discovery, as I mentioned on this film. You kind of dive in not knowing where it's going to take you. And I think the major discovery for me, you know, we went through all the different aspects of what all the emotions do. They protect you, you know, from getting hurt, et cetera, et cetera. In the end, I think the strongest thing that they do for us is to connect us. And just by expressing an emotion, that's how you become friends with people. That's how you establish deep relationships. And so it just seemed inherent in the concept to really talk about that with the emotions. Oh, it comes out June 19th. So just, what, like 5 weeks?
A little bit, yeah.
Hi, I just directed my first animated short, and I'm trying to make the leap from that, just working with one person, to, you know, a situation like yours where you have to communicate one idea across dozens, hundreds of departments. And so what are some things you've learned from project to project about kind of getting that across to all these hundreds of people who may have their own thoughts or things that are kind of contrary to what you wanted initially?
Yeah, well, first of all, congratulations. That's really cool. Hey! That has definitely been a learning curve for me. I know I came out of animation, so the way I would say talk to animators at first was very sort of result-oriented, and I would say, you know, have the hand here, and then in like 6 frames, move it over there. And what I realized is that's kind of taking away something from the animator, because if I can come in and tell them more what the character is feeling and why they're doing it, then the animator will put the movement in and the acting ideas better than probably I could, you know. And that's the case of working with the voice actors. I don't want to come in and say it like this. Well, you know, I'm not going to give them a line read because they're great actors. That's why I'm hiring them, is to do this great work for us and to contribute to the film. So I feel like my job primarily is to communicate to the artist in whatever department they are the information they need to know to creatively bring something to of themselves into the picture. So that's a little bit hard to parse out.
You're really good at that, and as is John Lasso, from a producer side, I see that a lot. That's where, even with Michael Giacchino, even with the composer, you know, I'll hear you say things like, I want this to feel like that feeling when you're lost. You know that feeling? And people will go, yeah, or whatever. So it's very, I don't know, it's a way to let people, because you're right, you don't want, everyone's going to come to the table with a way to do it, and it's your decision. But what they come to might lead you to another decision. So trying to harness and harmonize both those things is a real trick. The other piece of advice I'll say from a production standpoint is, you get into animation, it's so glacial. And so we give ourselves seasons. We always kind of call it like the seasons of the production. We'll say, all right, Pete, it's 2010. This is the year of story reels, or whatever. Like, literally make the big categories, and that helps you kind of chart. So I don't want to hear anything unless it's about story reels. You know, and that's, I don't know, that's just a simple way to frame.
If you're designing some small, you know, the glass on a table, then that's the wrong thing to be focused. I mean, that's going to have to happen too, but just by having those headlines, it really helps focus.
Back here.
There you go.
Hi, my name is Ricky Reba.
Hey, Ricky.
I'm an actor and I do voiceover work as well. I'm curious as to where you find your voiceover actors for the beginning process of the animation, for like the scratch work and that sort of thing, before you cast the actual voiceover actor that we see on the film.
Yeah, it's a good question. We actually, we're lucky at Pixar, we have a lot of great scratch actors. We call them Pixar players. So it's all kind of internal at first. My assistant Alyssa, you know, does a lot of the voices. She ended up being in WALL-E. She's the voice of Eve. Pete, weren't you Buzz?
Yeah. Yeah, Scratch.
Well, Scratch.
Sometimes it works out.
Most of that's internal. I mean, being up in Northern California, we're not sort of surrounded by the pool of actors and talent that is down here. When we ended up casting the film, I mean, we work with a casting director and the agent and so forth, but there are certain loop groups will come down here and record some actors with, and so it's all through sort of the casting channels that we have set up there through Pixar and Disney.
But the whole point of Scratch is just to get it done quick, to test it, and do it again and again. I mean, Alyssa, we gave her, I mean, she recorded like 9 movies worth of stuff, at least, literally, because we just never get it right the first time. Because we're dumb. else has a microphone.
There was a microphone.
Hi.
Hi.
So you guys had a real big writing challenge when creating emotional arcs for characters who embody one emotion. How did you create a dynamic arc for characters who are mostly static, by definition?
Yeah, well, you'll have to wait and see in the film. The main character, as I mentioned, Joy, is certainly capable of more than just happiness. She has to express frustration and anger and fear and all these different things. We kind of sprung them loose of only acting in one particular emotion themselves. We thought of them more as like that's their job to bring that to Riley. And they all care desperately about Riley. They love her and want what's best for her at any given moment, which is why they get into passionate arguments a lot of times. But that's really, we almost approach them as like workers or individual characters with a predisposition towards a certain temperament, if that makes sense.
But we tried some things even early on because you were aware that that was going to be tough. So even naming them, right? I mean, we even did a pass where, what if we didn't call them fear and anger and sadness? We called them Freddie
was fear. We had Ira.
Ira was anger.
I was adamant that if we named them by their titles, it would be too on the nose, and all the subtext would be on the text. And then it's just about what it's about, which is boring. Turns out I was wrong.
But it was a good exercise, and it was sort of pointed at that, like to prevent that. And I think that helped shake things loose and led to another thing. It was just a long process.
Two more questions.
Two more?
I don't know if there's a microphone. I see someone with a microphone.
Okay. Hi, first I want to say thank you for this good movie. I really enjoyed it. And do you think that for choosing these colors for each of these characters, do you think that it will have effects on kids' feelings? For example, I really like purple, but because fear is purple, do you think that it will have effects on someone's feelings?
That's a good question. I mean, we were trying to, we basically colored them because of the way people feel about them. So some of them are more obvious, like anger. When you get angry, you feel hot and you feel red. And so that just kind of was more, and same with joy, kind of that glow, sort of golden glow. Fear was kind of, if you look up there at the posters, we didn't know what to color fear because it just felt like kind of a gray, but we needed just a nice color to round it out. So we really chose purple because it was left over. But we're hoping that it doesn't negatively affect anybody in the way they feel about colors. I think it's just specific to these characters. You know, we've given them very specific hues and designs, and hopefully that's.
I hope it does. Yeah. I hope forever people are afraid of purple.
You have a question. Yeah.
Hi. We'll get you two.
So my question is basically for you as a director, when you only get these actors for a short amount of time to basically give the dialogue for the entire film, how do you prepare to work with them? Obviously, I know you've been doing all the research with your story and you know these characters, but then of course when you get a living, breathing actor, they bring their own sensibility into it. So what do you do to prepare for that? And when you're in the recording session with them, what goes through your mind? What do you do?
Yeah, that's a good question. Working with actors and preparing for that. Really what I do is I read the script over and over and over. And in most cases, like this film, I wrote the script, so that helps. But I'll also think about, like, okay, how could this be misinterpreted? And I'll write down kind of descriptive, like, action lines for the actor. So I think about the trap you fall into is like trying to have them emphasize a certain word or inflection in a certain way. Instead, if I can give them a job, like convince this other guy, or punish the character you're opposite, or seduce them, or whatever the sort of action line is, it really, and sometimes I'll come up with a couple different ones, some that are completely wrong, because sometimes actors get stuck, and we're doing the line so many times it just becomes gobbledygook. And so I'll throw some curveball at them, knowing that it's probably not going to work out, but like a nice sensitive line, if it's starting to just ring dull, I'll say, okay, piss the other guy off, that's your job now. So it's basically giving the actor these jobs so that they're not words, they're feelings, because that's ultimately, words are just kind of spelling out what you're trying to emote, to get across. So anyway, I don't know if that helps, but that's how I kind of think of it.
Hello.
Hi there.
Actually, to be honest, when I first saw the trailer, I wasn't sure where this film was going, how to take it, like what didn't happen. I was, if anything, coming today made me more excited and more curious, actually, to know more. How did you come up with the idea to say this would be a great movie to do? Because I know, and it's actually really cool to know that your daughter was the inspiration of this film, but I'm more curious about what did your daughter do, or what happened to make your mind to trigger to be, this would be such a great movie to do.
Well, actually, it makes me really happy to hear that you were like unsure and kind of questioning, and I don't know about this, because really what we're trying to do on every film that we work on is to surprise people and take them somewhere that they've never been before and show them things at least from a different angle. You know, I feel like every time we feel as though we're treading on ground that we've done before, we try to shy away from that, to do something else, and sometimes that's challenging to communicate to people in advertising and things, and we definitely put our marketing folks through the ringer sometimes, like Up, for example, you know. Come see this funny movie about a man whose wife dies and he floats off in a house in South America. Yeah! But, you know, it worked out.
It's kind of a miracle that we got to do it. I think the trailer, though, is I was really happy. I love that you said that. To us, we don't also like giving away too much as filmmakers, and one of the things with the marketing folks had this great idea to take the dinner scene, which we thought was pretty good, and do a version of it for the trailer. We were excited because Joy's not even in it. And so I thought, oh, that's kind of cool. You'll see a trailer, and it'll be about a concept, and hopefully people will like it enough, but you haven't even met the main character, which I was really excited about, because now as the movie rolls out, you start to see her, and it's really about her.
But it's you know, we are so fortunate and lucky to work at a place that supports that and allows us to kind of keep pushing things and surprising people, and of course you guys have that same chance. So we all are pretty lucky folks that we get to do this kind of stuff.
Yeah, we get to make stuff and put it in the world through some miracle of luck that we all get to do. But it was with this one and the idea, because, and I'll just speak to what you asked about too, because I'm a parent as well, and Ronnie Del Carmen is our co-director's a parent. His kids are older, mine are small. Kids are in high school and junior high, and we sort of attacked it as the emotions were sort of proxy parents, and so it's not like it's preachy. I don't mean it to sound corny at all, but it gave us a real believable foothold into making it, and it's what made us not go crazy by spending 5 years of our life on it, because it really is this observation of growing up and kind of like this is why we started with Disneyland, like our weird desire to like never grow up, kind of.
I mean, I had a great time playing with my kids. They were little, run around and tickle and stuff, and then my daughter got to an age where she's like, you know what, I don't want to do that. That's not wrong. She just came to a different stage in her life, and that made me kind of go, whoa, I kind of miss having little kids, you know? It's beautiful and great that she's growing up, and I'm so proud of her now. She's 16 years old. She's a wonderful, beautiful young woman. But I do miss having kids, and I sort of mourn that loss of childhood, both for her and for myself, and that's what the movie is talking about.
And our thought was everybody in the world has a kid or has been a kid and has felt that tug in some way, and that's our hope anyway. So that in the people ask us a lot, well, who's it for? And we can honestly say, well, because of that, we really hope it's for everybody. That there's something that is. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
Well, I think we're out of time. Huh?
Yeah. Thank you guys so much.
Thanks guys so much for coming out tonight. This film comes out June 19th in theaters everywhere. We want to say a special thank you to the team at Disney and Pixar for making this happen. and for if you haven't checked out the gallery, it's down the hall, and you can see some of the character artwork that was put into development before the actual characters got solidified. So check that out. Go see the movie, and thanks again to Pete and Jonas. This was really, really great. Thanks a lot.